spent the last weekend in Puerto Rico, and whenever I visit another country, I'm hyper aware of the fact that I'm a guest in someone else's home. As someone with a platform, I also feel like it's my responsibility to shed light on what is happening in Puerto Rico and how it's an example of modern day colonialism. Just earlier this month, there were hundreds of Puerto Ricans who traveled to Dorado to protest the access issues going on there. As it says here, by law, every beach in Puerto Rico should be open and accessible to public, but the last few decades have seen private beachfront hotels and apartments creep onto the coastline. Act 60, which is a legislative effort that was put into place a few years ago after the hurricane, essentially provides really big tax breaks for rich Americans, primarily individual investors, crypto bros essentially, to come to Puerto Rico, do business not in Puerto Rico but overseas, so it's not benefiting the local community, and getting huge tax breaks for it and tax exemptions. To maintain the tax breaks, these people who are moving to Puerto Rico are required to buy property within the first 2 years, which is driving up the prices of homes there and displacing residents who can no longer afford to live in the area. Essentially like accelerated gentrification happening within the island from overseas settlers from the US. And a lot of the people who are moving there who are interested in these tax breaks and evading taxes and honestly not giving a shit about displacing local residents happen to be a lot of individual investors and cryptocurrency traders. Many of these investors are also buying up property to essentially create Airbnb corridors, which is creating a further shortage of inventory for local residents, which is not okay, for first and foremost, like in and of itself, but also because 43% of Puerto Ricans live under the federal poverty line. What is so fucked up about Act 60 is that it's basically having overseas rich investors come to Puerto Rico, buy property, and do business outside of Puerto Rico, but then those tax breaks are in no way provided to local residents of Puerto Rico who are actually doing work for the country and for the local community. So again, read this. Tax breaks literally provided to people who have not lived there before and are buying homes there and have a lot of money and are looking for tax breaks. Yet the more than 3 million Puerto Ricans already living on the island do not qualify for any sort of tax breaks like that. There are whole articles out there about how crypto wealth is gentrifying Puerto Rico as well. And if you're interested in learning more, I strongly urge you to check out more information about Act 60 for expert services and commerce. It's so ridiculous. Literally here, Chapter 2 provides individual investor with 100% tax exemption from Puerto Rico income taxes. So no income taxes for these very wealthy settlers in Puerto Rico who are buying a property, have no incentive to give back to the local community, and to get the tax exemption are literally not able to do business within Puerto Rico but are exporting services. There are other examples from 100 years ago of legislative acts that are currently affecting the economic mobility of local residents. For example, the Jones Act of 1920, which is a shipping regulation. It basically requires that goods shipped from one American port to another be transported on a ship that is American-built, American-owned, and owned by U.S. citizens or permanent residents, which makes it very expensive for anything coming in and out of Puerto Rico since it's a U.S. territory, making everything more expensive. If you travel to Puerto Rico, be mindful.